सद्धर्म संस्थापकं लोकानां हितकारिणं त्रिभुवने मन्नं शरण्याकरं नानाशास्त्रविचारणं सद्धर्म संस्थापकं लोकानां हितकारिणं त्रिभुवने मन्नं शरण्याकरं राधा कृष्ण पदारविन्द भजनानन्देन मत्वालिकं वन्दे रूप सनातनं रघुजुगं श्रीजीव गोपालकं कृष्ण कीर्तन गान नर्तन परं प्रेमामृताम्बनिधि श्री चैतन्य कृपाभरो भुवि भुव भारावहन्तारकं वन्दे रूप सनातनं रघुजुगं श्रीजीव गोपालकं श्रीगौरांग गुणानुवर्णन विधौ सध्यासमिद्धार्नितं पापत्रापनिकृन्तनं तनुभृतां गोविन्द गानामृतैः श्री गौरांग गुणानुवर्णन विधौ सध्यासमिद्धान्वितं पापत्रापनिकृन्तनं तनुभृतां गोविन्द गानामृतैः आनन्दामृतिवर्धनैकनिपुणं जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी यशोदानंदन व्रजजन रंजन यशोदानंदन व्रजजन रंजन जमुना तीर बनचारी गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रजजन रंजन यशोदानंदन व्रजजन रंजन यमुना तीर बनचारी यमुना तीर बनचारी Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sam Kanda Radha Kunda Duryodhan ki jai, Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Navadvip Dham ki jai, Ganga Mai ki jai, Jamuna Mai ki jai, Dwarka Dham ki jai, Swami Bhaktivinoda ki jai. All glories to that. All glories to that. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Gurudev, all glories to Samad Vaishnava devotees, and all glories to Her Grace Mother Malati Devi Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Mother. Thank you for being here. Dear devotees, we thank you all for being here today, beginning of another week. We are fortunate to have the association of our big auntie, Her Grace Mother Malati, who will be speaking to us from the Srimad Bhagavatam today. So, Mother, as always, it's beautiful. You did not miss the time this time. Yes, because we were doing it at 11 o'clock, then it changed to 10 o'clock.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So I may put the verse on the screen and then you take it over from here, Mother.
Okay. Hare Krishna. Hare
Thank you.
Krishna, everybody.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mother.
Srimad Bhagavatam 2:7-28. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Yadvai Vraje Vraja Asum Viso Taya Pitan Palam Suraja Ajiviyad Anugraha Drishti Vishtaya Takshadalhe Ti Vishaviraya Viya Vilola Shivam Utatayasya Durkam Viharam Hayadanyam. And move it up. Yat one who, by certainly Rajayat Vrindavan Rajapashun, the animal thereof, Vishatoya, poisoned water, Pitan, those who drank, Palan, the cowherd men, two also, Ajivayat, brought to life, Anugraha, Drishti, merciful glance, Vristaya, by the showers of that, Shudaye, for purification, Ati, exceedingly, Vishaviraya, highly potent poison, Viola, lurking, Jifam, one who has such a tongue, Achat, Tayeshat, severely punished, Uragam, unto the snake, Viharam, taking it as a pleasure, Haradinyam, in the river. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Then also, when the cowherd boys and their animals drank the poisoned water of the river Yamuna, and after the Lord in his childhood received them by his merciful glance, just to purify the water of the river Yamuna, he jumped into it as if playing. He chastised the venomous snake which was lurking there, its tongues emitting waves of poison. Who can perform such Herculean acts but the Supreme Lord? So this is the verse, and it is that there is no purport to that verse. And then I was thinking what to say, mental speculation aside, and I thought what could be better than just narrate the beautiful story about Krishna subduing Kaliya from the Krishna book, chapter 16. So I think you all know the story of the Krishna book, how it came to be published. The first publication was paid for by George Harrison Prabhu, because at that time ISKCON did not have even the wherewithal to publish this beautiful book that was just waiting. It had been translated by Prabhupada, the purports, everything was there, beautiful paintings, and it was sitting in an armoire, a storage closet, because there was no money, and then for the publication. And then Srila Prabhupada asked Shamsundar Prabhu to ask George Harrison, if he would pay for the publication. And Shamsundar was very uncomfortable with that request, even though it came from Prabhupada, because our policy had strictly been not to ask for anything. Because when you're very wealthy, when you're very famous, everybody's coming with their hands out, give me, give me. And we came with our hands folded together with something to give to them. So Shamsundar was thinking, now that George is going to think we're just like everybody else. And there was a dinner at the home of a very famous sculptor. And during the dinner, there was a sudden storm. And Shamsundar was already in anxiety, like, oh, I've got to make this request, and and Prabhupada told him, don't worry, you just tell him I'm asking, but still Shamsundar was in anxiety. So it was getting near the end of the dinner, and Shamsundar's thinking, I have to ask him, the dinner's almost over, and then the chance will have passed. So he was trying to gather up his courage, and suddenly lightning struck, and all the electricity went out. And they were sitting there at the table, a very long, beautiful table, in darkness. And then all of a sudden, as quickly as the lights went out, the lights came back on. And he was, looking at George like, what kind of expression will he have on his face? But it was quite amazing. George kind of almost smiled, and he goes, well, you can't argue with that, can you? How much will it be? So by that wonderful intervention on behalf of Lord Indra with his wonderful display, in that instant, George's heart, from within, he understood here was a wonderful opportunity to do some service. So next day he went to see Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada was so gracious to him. If I have time, I'll say a few words about Prabhupada and George Harrison at the end of this. So it's more like a little narration, subduing of Kaliya. So, Sukadeva Goswami, he's narrating the Bhagavatam to Maharaj Parikshit. And as Maharaj Parikshit is hearing, he's becoming more and more eager to hear about Krishna's childhood pastimes. Sometimes we want to be eager, but we're not so eager. There was a famous story in New Vrindavan on a historic Janmashtami when Srila Prabhupada was present. So he has the devotees starting to read from Krishna book, right from the beginning. And it's already very late. They've been fasting all day, working really hard, and they were starving and tired. And so the book somebody's reading, and everybody's trying to keep their eyes open, and their bellies are making noises. And then finally they come to the end. The first introductory chapter is quite long. And they're thinking, okay, now, and Prabhupada says, go on, continue. And this went on for quite some time, so way past midnight. And, devotees were visibly sleeping, practically speaking. And then Prabhupada, said, okay, we can stop now and take prasad. And devotees were suddenly, Jai, Srila Prabhupada, But Maharaj Parikshit, he became, as he was hearing He didn't become tired. He wasn't eating. He was fasting because he wanted all of his energy to be able to hear about the pastimes of Lord Krishna, and particularly the childhood pastimes. So he inquired to Shukadeva Goswami how Krishna chastised Kaliya. Kaliya was a big, terrible, demoniac serpent who was living in the water of the Yamuna for many, many years. And more Maharaj Parikshit was hearing these transcendental pastimes about Krishna. He became even more enthusiastic to hear more. So his inquiry was made. I want to hear more. Tell me more. So within the river, Yamuna, there was a lake within the river. And in that lake, the black serpent Kaliya used to live. And because of his poison, the venomous snake poison, the whole area was so contaminated that it emanated this like poisonous vapor 24 hours a day. If a bird happened to even pass over that spot, immediately it would just fall down in the water and die. It was so contaminated. So due to the poisonous effect of the Yamuna's vapors, even the trees and the grass near the bank of the Yamuna had also dried up. So Krishna saw the effect of this serpent's poison, and the whole river that ran before Vrindavan had now become deadly. So Krishna, who had advented just to kill all the undesirable elements in the world, he immediately climbed up on a big kandamba tree on the bank of the Yamuna. So this kandamba, it's a round yellow flower, quite large. It's generally seen only in the Vrindavan area. When he climbed to the top of that tree, keep in mind, he's a little guy, 5 years old. He gets to the top, he tightens his belt cloth, he flaps his arms like a wrestler, like preparing for the onslaught. And then he jumped in the middle of the poisonous lake. So the kandamba tree from which Krishna had jumped was the only tree in the area that wasn't dead. And some people say that that was due to touching the lotus feet of Krishna, that the tree had immediately returned to life. So when Krishna jumped into the water, the river overflooded its banks as if something very large had fallen into it. So this exhibition of Krishna's strength isn't that uncommon, because Krishna is the reservoir of all strength. And when he was swimming about, just like a great strong elephant, he made a tumultuous sound, and Kaliya heard that. And it was intolerable for him. He could understand that this was an attempt to attack his home. So immediately he came before Krishna. And Kaliya saw that Krishna was indeed worth seeing. Why? Because his body was so beautiful and delicate. His color resembled that of a cloud, and his legs represented a lotus flower. And he was decorated with the Srivatsa jewel and great, very yellow garments. And he was smiling with a beautiful face. And he was just playing in the river Yamuna with great strength. But in spite of Krishna's beautiful features, Kaliya was feeling great anger and agitation within his heart, and thus he grabbed Krishna within his mighty coils. So, seeing the incredible way in which Krishna was he was wrapped in the coals of the serpent, the affectionate cowherd boys and the inhabitants of Vrindavan immediately they became stunned out of fear. They dedicated everything to Krishna, their lives, their property, their affection, their activities, everything was for Krishna. And when they saw him in that condition, they became overwhelmed with fear and they fell to the ground. And all the cows and the bulls and the small calves, they also became overwhelmed with grief. And they began to look at Krishna with great anxiety. Out of fear, they could only cry in agony and stand erect on the bank, unable to help their beloved Krishna. Now, sometimes there's situations when a child is in danger or being attacked, and the parent, they're seeing this, but they're just unable to do anything. Maybe it's too far away, but they become stunned. They know they need some help. They want to be that help, but they're unable to move, just stunned. So here they were, all the residents, and out of fear, they could only cry in agony and stand erect on the bank because they weren't able to help their beloved Krishna. When we had the mantra rock dance, the first such event in San Francisco of '69, and Srila Prabhupada was there, our chief guest, I remember I had gone up into the balcony because you could see more, right? So I'm looking, and all of a sudden I'm just seeing Prabhupada come on the stage. And I was just feeling like a helpless mother if my kid would have run into the freeway, the motorway, into the interstate. You'd want to immediately rescue the kid, but you would have limited ability, and you would just be there like stunned. So that's kind of the situation. They wanted to help, but they had no ability. And they couldn't move out of fear. And so, meantime, Krishna's swimming about just like a strong elephant, makes this sound. Kalia is like really angry because he understood this was an attempt to attack his home, his domain. So he came before Krishna. And Kalia saw that Krishna was indeed worth seeing because his body was so beautiful and delicate. The color resembled that of a cloud. His legs resembled a blue lotus flower. He was decorated with Srivatsa, jewels, and yellow garments, and he was smiling with a beautiful face. And he was playing on the river Yamuna with great strength. But in spite of Krishna's beautiful features, Kaliya felt great anger within his heart, and thus he grabbed Krishna with his mighty coils. So, seeing the incredible way in which Krishna was enveloped in the coils of the serpent, the affectionate cowherd boys and inhabitants of Vrindavan immediately became stunned out of fear. They had dedicated everything to Krishna. Their lives, their property, their affection, activity, everything was for Krishna. And when they saw him in that condition, they became overwhelmed with fear and they just fell down on the ground. And then the cows and the bulls and the small calves, they became overwhelmed in grief. And they're looking to Krishna with great anxiety, but they could only cry in agony and stand erect on the bank, unable to help their beloved Krishna. When you feel like that, when that helplessness envelops you, you know something has to be done, but you feel helpless. You just become stunned, you become immobilized. So while this scene was taking place on the bank of the Yamuna, there was ill omens all around, and they manifest. The earth trembled, meteors fell out of the sky, and the bodies of the men shivered. All these were indications of great immediate danger. Observing these inauspicious signs, the cowherd men, which included Maharaj Nanda, they became very anxious out of fear. And at the same time, they were informed that Krishna had gone to the pasturing grounds without his elder brother Balaram. In other words, Balaram and Krishna were always to remain together, but now Krishna had gone alone. And as soon as Nanda and Yasoda and the cowherd men heard this news, they were even more anxious because out of their great affection for Krishna, they were totally unaware of the extent of Krishna's potencies. They saw Krishna as their beloved little cowherd friend, best of the cowherds, but still a little boy. And they didn't know the extent of his potencies. So they're overwhelmed with grief and anxiety because there was nothing more dear to them than Krishna. They dedicated their everything, life, property, affection, mind, activities, all to Krishna. And because of their great attachment for Krishna, they thought, oh, today Krishna is surely going to be vanquished. Because they're not thinking, here's Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They're not thinking like that. So all the inhabitants of Vrindavan came out of the village to see Krishna. And the assembly was like children, young, old men, women, animals, all the living entities. They knew that Krishna was their only means of subsistence. And while this was happening, Balaram was the master of all knowledge. He just simply stood there. He was smiling. Why? Because he knew how powerful his younger brother Krishna was. He knew there was no cause for anxiety when Krishna was fighting with an ordinary serpent of the material world. He didn't therefore take any personal part in their concern. But on the other hand, the inhabitants of Braj, they were so disturbed, and they began to search out Krishna by following the impression of his footprints on the ground. And thus they were going toward the bank of the Yamuna. And finally, the footprints, they were marked with the flag, the bow, the conch shell, and they arrived, all the inhabitants of Vrindavan arrived at the riverbank, and they saw the cows, and the boys were weeping, and there was Krishna wrapped in the coils of that black serpent. They became even more overwhelmed with grief. And Balaram was just smiling to see the lamentation. And the inhabitants of Brajbhumi emerged into the ocean of grief because they're thinking, oh, Krishna's finished. So, they didn't know much about Krishna. Their love was beyond comparison. As soon as they saw that Krishna was in the river, Yamuna, enveloped by the serpent, and that all the boys and cows were lamenting, they began to think of Krishna's friendship, of his smiling face, his sweet words, and his dealings with them. And now they're thinking that Krishna, who was within the clutches of Kaliya, they felt like all the three worlds were now vacant. And just like Lord Chaitanya said, he was seeing the three worlds as vacant in the absence of Krishna. So this is the highest level of Krishna consciousness. Almost all the inhabitants of Vrindavan had the highest ecstatic love for Krishna because they were not seeing him as the almighty powerful Lord. They simply loved him, their dearmost friend. When Mother Yasoda arrived, she had no plan. No, she was just completely in anxiety about her son. And she wanted to enter the river Jamuna, but everybody stopped her because what could she have done? And the waters were poisoned now. So she fainted. And other friends who were equally aggrieved, they were shedding tears like torrents of rain or river waves. But in order to bring Mother Yasoda to consciousness, they began to speak loudly about the transcendental pastimes of Krishna. And Mother Yasoda, she just remained still as if dead because her consciousness was concentrated on the beautiful face of Krishna. Nanda and all the others who dedicated everything, including their lives to Krishna, they were ready. They were ready to go into the water of the Yamuna. But Balaram stopped them because he was in perfect knowledge and he knew there was no danger. So for 2 hours, imagine being up 2 hours gripped in the coils of a snake. One could not even imagine 1 second in that condition. And for 2 hours, Krishna remained like an ordinary child gripped in the coils of Kaliya. But when he saw that all the inhabitants of Gokul, including his mother and father and the gopis and the gopas and the cows, when he saw they were just on the point of death and they had no other shelter or salvation, Krishna immediately freed himself. It was nothing for him to get free from the coils of the serpent. He just began to expand his body, and when the serpent tried to hold him, he felt a great strain. And on the account of the strain, his coils slackened, and he had no other alternative but to let loose of the personality of Godhead, Krishna, from his grasp. So then Kalia became really very angry. And his big hoods, they started to expand. And he exhaled poisonous fumes from his nostrils, and his eyes blazed like fire, and flames issued from his mouth. That's a very fearful sight. The great serpent remained still for some time, looking at Krishna, licking his lips with his bifurcated tongues. And the serpent looked at Krishna with double hoods, and his eyesight was full of poison. Krishna immediately pounced on him, just as Garuda swoops upon a snake. And being thus attacked, Kalia looked for an opportunity to bite him, but Krishna moved around. And as Krishna and Kalia moved in a circle, the serpent gradually became fatigued, and his strength diminished considerably. So Krishna immediately pressed down on the serpent's hoods, and he started to jump on them. And the Lord's lotus feet became tinged with red from the rays of the jewels that were on the serpent's hoods. And then he began to dance on the hoods of the serpents, although they were moving to and fro. Can you just imagine this? Upon seeing this, denizens of the upper planetary system, they began to shower flowers. They were beating drums. They were playing different kinds of flutes and singing various prayers and songs. So when Krishna was dancing on his hoods, Kalia tried to push him down with some of his other hoods. And Kalia had about 100 hoods. But Krishna began to dash his hoods with his lotus feet. And this was more than the serpent could bear. And gradually, Kalia was reduced to struggling for his very life. And he had vomited all kinds of refuse and exhaled fire. And while throwing up poisonous material from within, Kalia became reduced in his sinful situation. Out of great anger, he began to struggle for existence, and he tried to raise one of his hoods to kill Krishna. But the Lord immediately captured that hood, and he subdued it by kicking it and dancing on it. It actually appeared as if Vishnu was being worshipped. The poisons emanating from his mouth of the serpent appeared to be like a flower offering. And then Kalia began to vomit blood instead of poison. He was completely fatigued. His whole body appeared to be broken by the kicks of the Lord. Within his mind, finally he began to understand that Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he began to surrender everything to him. And he realized that Krishna was the Supreme Lord, the master of everything. So the wives of the serpent Kalia, they were called Nagapatis. They saw that their husband was being subdued by the kicking of Lord Krishna. And then the wives also surrendered into the Supreme Lord, and they began to pray. And they appeared before Krishna. They put down their offspring, and they anxiously offered respectful obeisances, but falling down on the bank of the Yamuna, Dandavats. And then Nagapatis knew that Krishna is the shelter of all surrendered souls, and they desired to release their husband from danger by pleasing the Lord with their prayers. So the Nagapatis, they confirm one cannot come into contact with Krishna without having executed pious activities in devotional service in previous lives. So they understood this was not just an ordinary situation. Due to the previous lives, their husband was getting this extraordinary mercy. And they were astonished that although Kalia had the body of a serpent as a result of grievous, means terrible sinful activities, at the same time he was in contact with the Lord to the extent that the Lord's lotus feet were touching their hoods. Certainly, this was not the ordinary result of a pious being. This was not the ordinary results of pious activities. So these two contradictory facts were astonishing the boys. They knew on one hand that you can't come in contact with Krishna without having executed pious activities in devotional service in the previous lives. But here was Kalia in the body of a serpent who was just, the body was the result of grievous sinful activities, previous activities. And now here he was in contact with the lotus feet of the Lord. This was quite amazing and quite bewildering. So the Nagapatis, they were praying, oh, dear Lord, we're simply astonished to see that our husband is so fortunate as to have the dust of your lotus feet on his head. This is a fortune sought after by great saintly people. Even the goddess of fortune underwent severe austerities just to have the blessing of the dust of your lotus feet. So how is it that Kalia is so easily getting this dust on his head? In other words, it's not cheap. And Kalia was just so demoniac. How is it he's getting the dust of the Lord's lotus feet on his head? It's confirmed also in the Chaitanya Chaitamrita that the living entities are wandering within the universe in various species of life, but it is the mercy of the Lord and the mercy of the Lord and the spiritual master. So you get this seed of devotional service, and then the path of liberation can be cleared. So the Nagapantis, we are therefore offer our respectful obeisances unto you, our dear Lord, because you are the Supreme Person. You are living as a super soul within every living being. Although you are transcendental through the cosmic manifestation, everything is resting in you. You are the personification of indefatigable eternal time. The eternal time force is existing in you, and you are therefore the seer and the embodiment of the total time in the shape of past, present, and future. Month, day, hour, moment, everything. It is you. In other words, O Lord, you, only you can perfectly see all the activities happening in every moment, in every hour, in every day, in every year, past, present, and future. You are the universal form, and yet you are different from this universe. You are universal. So we therefore offer our respectful obeisances unto you. Just by seeing this wonderful activity of the Lord dancing on their husbands' head, on their hoods, they became empowered to speak these beautiful prayers. They went on, you are the ultimate goal of all philosophical efforts, and you are actually described by all philosophies and by different doctrines. Let us offer our respectful obeisances unto you, because you are the origin of all scripture and the source of all knowledge. You are the root of all evidences, and you are the supreme person who can bestow upon us the supreme knowledge. You are the cause of all kinds of desires. You are the cause of all kinds of satisfaction. You are the Vedas personified. Therefore, we offer our respectful obeisances unto you. Lord, we're submitting our prayers unto you. You can appreciate that this poor serpent is going to give up his life. You know that for us women, our lives and everything are our husbands. Therefore, we're praying unto you that you kindly excuse our husband, because if this serpent dies, then we should be in great difficulty. So looking upon us only, please excuse this great offender. So these beautiful prayers on behalf, they weren't asking anything for themselves. Just like we saw Prahlad, he did not ask anything for himself. A symbol of great devotion. They were continuing, my dear Lord, every living creature is your offspring, and you maintain everyone. This serpent is also your offspring, and you can excuse him, even though he's offended you. And you can order us and ask us to do whatever you please. Every living entity can be relieved from all kinds of disrepair if he agrees to abide by your orders. So, again, a very powerful realization. You're the Lord. You're every living creature is an offspring of the Lord, and He maintains everyone. So the serpent, our husband, is also your offspring. So you have the power to excuse him. Um, this these realizations were coming to the Nagapatnis, to the wives of the great demon, or the serpent Kalia, just because of their soft-hearted submission to the Lord. So after they submitted their prayers, Krishna relieved Kalia from his punishment. And at that point, Kalia was already unconscious, having been struck by the Lord. But upon regaining consciousness and being released from the punishment, Kalia got his life force back. And he began also to praise, my dear Lord, I've been born in such a species that by nature I'm angry and envious. Being in the darkest region in the mode of ignorance, your lordship knows well that it's very difficult to give up one's natural inclinations, although such instincts. So it's very difficult to give up one's natural instincts, although such instincts of the living creature transmigrate from one body to the other. In other words, whatever undesirable qualities we're holding on to, they're going to chase us down and follow us to our next birth unless we take to the great process of rectification through chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So Kalia was continuing, my dear Lord, I've been born in such a species that by nature, it's my nature to be angry and envious, being in the darkest region in the mode of ignorance. Your lordship knows well that it is very difficult to give up one's natural instincts, although such instincts, the living entity, transmigrates from one body to the other. So sometimes when people are close to death, they're welcoming death because they've had a miserable life, and they don't realize, unless they take the effort to free themselves from the illusion of material life, all these nasty things that they have been taking as their propensities, they're not going to disappear at the time of death. They'll follow. They'll be there in your next birth. So how much important it is that we pay attention now while we're relatively young and relatively able to do something about it. My dear Lord, I'm born as a serpent, and therefore by natural instinct, I'm very angry. It was second nature. It's natural. Serpents are not pleasing. How is it impossible to give up an acquired nature without your mercy? It's very difficult to get out of the clutches of your Maya. By your Maya, we remain enslaved. My dear Lord, kindly excuse me for my inevitable tendencies. You can punish me or save me as you please. So this is definitely the mood of a pure devotee. And Kalia was finding himself freed from all his iniquities, of all the darkness of his path. And he is saying, you can punish me or save me as you desire. Please excuse me for my inevitable tendencies. In other words, these tendencies are there. They came with me from my last life, and I've been acting on them in this life. They're inevitable. Only you can free me. You can punish me or save me as you like. Just like Prabhupada wrote in that beautiful poem when he was disembarking from the ship in Boston. I'm simply your puppet. You can, my dear Lord, you can make me dance this way or that way as you like, as you like. So upon hearing this, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he was acting in the role of a small human-like child. He ordered the serpent, you must immediately leave this place and go to the ocean. To leave without delay. You take with you all your offspring. You take your wives, everything that you possess. Don't pollute the waters of the Yamuna anymore. Let it be drunk by my cows and cowherd boys without hindrance. Because the pollution had been so intense that just flying over the spot, one would become mortally affected, what to speak of drinking. So now Krishna is taking immediate steps to purify that place so that the cows and cowherd boys could drink safely. And they didn't have Brita water filters in those days. They didn't really have a need. They just understood that what was not being used in Krishna's service, it would be used for Maya's service. So better to get back to base and go away, and let this water become purified, and let it be drunk by my cows and cowherd boys without hindrance. So then the Lord declared that the order given to the Kaliya snake be recited and heard by everyone, so that no one need fear the Kaliya any longer. And anyone hears the narration of the Kaliya serpent will no longer fear the envious activities of the snakes. They're just envy and snake. They're like go together. So the Lord declared, if one takes a bath in the Kaliya lake, where my cowherd boyfriends and I have bathed, or if fasting for one day, they offer oblations to the forefathers from the water of this lake, it will be immediately relieved of all kinds of sinful reaction. And then the Lord assured Kaliya, you came here out of fear of Garuda. Garuda wanted to eat you. Now, after seeing the marks where I have touched your head with my lotus feet, Garuda will no longer disturb you. He will, upon hearing his order, then the wives, they begin to worship Lord Krishna with great offerings of nice garments and flowers and garlands, jewels, ornaments, sandalwood pulp, lotus flowers, nice edible fruits, and in this way they pleased the master of Garuda, Lord Krishna, of whom they were actually very much afraid formerly. But now, by obeying the orders of Lord Krishna, all of them left the lake within the Yamuna. So this is the ending. It said, thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 16th chapter of Krishna subduing Kaliya. So Prabhupada published this Krishna book before he had finished the purports for the other chapters of the Bhagavatam. And only a small portion of the 10th canto is there about the rasa dance. It's there, but all the other beautiful, sweet pastimes of this incredible baby boy were being, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Only a small portion of the Krishna book is dedicated to the intense pastime of the rasa dance, and yet that's where everybody immediately wants to go. But all these other beautiful pastimes are there to lead us up to that point. And by reading these different pastimes, by hearing these different pastimes, we go through a process of purification, where just like the wives of the Nagapatis, we become attached to the lotus feet of Krishna. And we want to offer prayers, spontaneous prayers of devotion to the Lord's lotus feet. And by doing so, by pleasing the Lord in that way, we become completely freed from our unfortunate material aspect of life. It becomes fully purified, and we become one of the Lord's eternal companions. So the Krishna book is a great offering to mankind by Srila Prabhupada. And the first publication was paid for by George Harrison. So what an incredible service George did by paying for that book to be published at a time when there was no money in ISKCON to pay for the publication. And Prabhupada was so pleased with him, so pleased with George Harrison and the service he rendered, because he understood that by doing these services, a greater amount of people were going to be affected and come in contact with Krishna than if we were just doing it on our own. And Prabhupada, he would often call him Shriman George Harrison Prabhu. And he's told us we should be very grateful to George for the services he has rendered, and in particular about financing this Krishna book. And George himself expressed that he said, I felt like it was part of my job, you know. Wherever I go in the world, when I see devotees, I always say Hare Krishna to them, and they're always pleased to see me. So it's a nice relationship. Whether they know me personally or not, they feel like they know me, and they do really. So George also felt very pleased that he was able to assist Srila Prabhupada in his mission. And in later years, following Prabhupada's departure, George was reflecting. He goes, when I first met him, I underestimated him. I didn't realize it then, but I now see that because of him, the mantra has spread so far in the last 16 years, more than it had in the last 5 centuries. That's pretty amazing, because he was getting older and older, and yet he was writing his books all the time. Now I realize he was much more incredible than you could see on the surface. So, in other words, after Prabhupada's departure, George's appreciation of Prabhupada continued to expand, and his efforts to assist Srila Prabhupada were very dear to him. He said that he actually, it was interesting because George was seeing things in the material world going down, down, down. And he felt like it was pretty hopeless. But at the same time, Mukunda asked, but do you have any hope? And he goes, yes. He goes, yes. Because Prabhupada has definitely affected the world in an absolute way. So yes, there's hope. And he felt like that the best place to start was by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So he was impacted by Prabhupada, and his appreciation for Prabhupada deepened even in the Prabhupada's absence as the years went by. And he was seeing how the movement was growing and expanding in spite of Prabhupada's absence. And he realized Prabhupada was present in his books. Yeah. As he said in the beginning, he was asked to write a little purport to the, a little, what do you say? Yeah, a little introduction of the Krishna book. He wrote, everyone is looking for Krishna. Some don't realize that they are, but they are. Krishna is God, the source of all that exists, the cause of all that is, was, or ever will be. So any person who comes into contact with Krishna or Krishna's devotees, if they remain favorable, they will get these wonderful realizations. And spiritual realizations are not cheap things. They're deep, they're meaningful, and they prepare the way for future spiritual growth. So, okay. So, yeah. Anyway, it's almost 11.
Yeah.
If anybody has some further comments, that would be nice.
Well, Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Mother, for such a beautiful narration of the pastimes of Krishna with the Kaliya serpent.
Yeah.
So, dear devotees, if
Yeah.
anyone may have a question.
And I just remembered one other part. So
Yes, please.
Initially, Kaliya had gone to that place to escape Garuda.
Mhm.
And now he's being sent away then he will be more vulnerable. But Krishna said, no, because I've danced on your hoods, I've left marks. And when Garuda sees these marks, he will leave you alone.
Yeah.
So anybody who becomes touched by Krishna will be protected from the onslaught of whatever demoniac force of nature there is. And sometimes you could say, but this is happening, this is happening. It may be, but the devotee is always protected and his consciousness is always pure.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that as well. Mother, I have one question. Coming from the wives of Kalia,
Yeah.
the Naga
Yeah.
partners, and I'm comparing their attitude with the wife of Ravana, Mandodari.
Mm-hmm.
When Mandodari saw how Ravana was trying to usurp Sita, she spoke to him. He says, "Hey, my dear Lord, please don't do this, don't do that." I mean, even before he really attacked Sati.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
sorry,
they
Sita.
saw they saw the writing on the wall.
Yes. But these Naga partners didn't make any move to protecting Krishna until they found their husband in trouble. So what we learned from these two ladies, the Naga partners and then Mandodari, and
Yes.
which one should we try to emulate?
Well, naturally, eventually the Nagapatis, they got it. They woke up. But if you're under the influence of a person who's in the mode of ignorance, you're going to be in that same mode. And it's not like you'll get immediately, oh, now I get it. Sometimes it takes a while. So they got it, but it took watching the Lord practically kill their husband. Like he was dancing on Kalia so much that finally he was just like almost dead. And then the wives are praying, and he stopped that dancing. And when he stopped, he was still faint. He was still unconscious. He had to come back into consciousness. It was a very intense scenario. And naturally, when the wives saw that, they became humbled and grateful, and they could understand. The wife is not supposed to think, oh, the husband, he's supposed to think of the husband, how so wonderful my husband is. But they were realizing, okay, my husband may be wonderful, but he's in Maya. He's in illusion. And therefore their real prayers would uncover that illusion. That's how he would be saved. Please save my husband. But how would he be saved? By destroying the illusion. And that dancing on the head of his hoods, that's what was happening. The illusions were being destroyed.
Mm.
And as soon as Kalia regained his consciousness, he also began to offer wonderful prayers of gratitude. He understood how foolish he had been. Just like there's another example, Indra, when he tried to, attack the denizens and drown them with these horrible clouds. When he regained his right thinking, immediately he's just offering prayers of gratitude and praise. It's a natural thing. If somebody helps you, particularly saves your life, immediately gratitude. And along with that gratitude becomes an ability that might not normally be there to express your gratitude in a wonderful way through prayers and praise. Just like Dhruva Maharaj, he was out there in the forest. He was praying for a bigger and better kingdom than his father. But that's not what happened. Of course, it did happen, but it didn't happen in the way he was thinking he wanted it. And when the Lord appeared in front of him, he realized how foolish he had been. That was the real grace. Not that he actually ended up getting a kingdom. That was, side story. The real story was that he regained full consciousness, and then he began offering beautiful prayers. Out of the mouth of this child came these beautiful prayers.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mother. Anyone else with any question, please? See, Mother,
Otherwise,
No, please. I have one more question. This question is a bit complicated because I've been trying to figure out how to put it together so it will be a little easier and simpler. But during the pastime of this same Krishna Kaliya Leela, when Krishna jumped into the river
Yeah.
and was fighting this Kaliya, everybody was overwhelmed. Everybody was feeling, oh, we're going to lose our dearest Krishna.
Yeah.
Up to the point Mother Yashoda wanted to jump into the river and she
Yeah.
had to be stopped because all of them were trying to protect Krishna.
Yes.
Now, we know that our gurus, even though they are not Krishna, but because they are devout servants of the Lord, they are as good as Krishna. But sometimes some of us begin to think that because they are as good as Krishna, they don't need any care, they don't need any protection, they don't need anything. I mean, they don't feel pain, they don't need anything, which to me, it's improper, it's inaccurate in the sense that we're seeing that even though Krishna is Krishna, but the denizens are trying to do something to protect Krishna. So
Yes.
what
That's the
price?
ultimate shape of love.
Okay. Okay.
And we have not developed that. We have the impersonal tendencies and we're also envious. That's part of the material conditioning. If we become envious of Guru and Krishna, why should I do anything for him? He has everything, you know. But we're not realizing whatever we do is really for our own benefit. The fact is, you know, and being able to serve Guru and Krishna, our devotees. It's not, you know, Krishna, Guru means devotees also. It's not offenses around them and nobody else is there. Really important point. So whether it's direct service to Krishna or Guru, or those devotees of Krishna and Guru, we get the benefit.
Hmm. Hmm.
It may look, oh, we're benefiting them. No, we're benefiting ourselves.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mother. So we go to Vanat Das Prabhu. Please, you may unmute.
And I want to wish you happy holidays. And I probably won't speak to you until next year, which is just shortly coming. So wish you a very happy incoming new year.
Thank you
with
so much, Mother.
unlimited levels of devotional service, increasing levels of devotional service.
Hare Krishna, thank you. We needed that. Vanat Das Prabhu, is it possible to turn on your camera, please?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for giving us this wonderful nectar to digest. I was just looking at the story you were narrating, Kaliya Leela. As I was listening, I was also deducting something from it. We can say that Kaliya, just like the wife, the Naga partner was saying, that Kaliya is the treatment is like a blessing, it's like a medicine to him. But one will ask, what kind of medicine is that? After getting the medicine, at the same time, Krishna drove him away from Vrindavan. Vrindavan, that we want to be, because that is the abode of Krishna. And yeah, and he has gotten the medicine. At the same time, Krishna is driving him away from his abode. So how do we fix that?
Because that's kind of embedded. Kaliya was understanding, had a particular nature. Snakes have an envious nature. So he was saying, even though I have this, envious nature, you're still, still please give me your mercy, because even though this nature, I'm still one of you. You are the Lord of everyone and every living entity. I'm one of the living entities. So please give me your mercy. And that's a fact. But why did he drive him away? To protect him from his own envious nature. Because you saw he had entrance. Somehow he gained entrance, but he poisoned the place. So he became an offense. So just like when Maharaj Pritha was telling Kali, okay, Kali's saying, you have to give me some little place. Okay, you go there where there is, these sinful activities taking place. There you can stay. That way, because he had a certain nature, he was going, whether he wanted to or not, he was going to act in a certain way. Better he's in an area where that kind of behavior would not affect too many people, because everybody around was doing the same thing. So Kalia was sent somewhere where he would not be affecting the innocent the innocent Brajvasis. It was for his protection. At the same time, it was a mercy of the Lord. The Lord had danced on his head, and he couldn't forget that. And he left marks on the wood, on the hoods, so that Garuda would never bother them.
So it's like history really keeps repeating itself, because in the Bible also there is a passage whereby God ordered his angels to go around a particular city and mark each and every devotee of his with a mark of himself, that when the devil comes to torment them, they will not torment them because of that seal. So we're seeing
Yes.
it originated with Krishna and Kaliya. Wow.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, thank you so
And
much.
therefore we wear our tilak, we have our kunti mala,
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So
I have to.
without further questions, we think we may allow Mother to leave. She has already given us her blessings for the rest of the year. And we hope and pray that we all get protected and we come back next year. We still have some few days to go within the
Like
year.
when we say protected, we're really wanting protected from, illusion. Please protect me from my, foolishness, my illusion, my attachment to material sense gratification. Protect me from that, so that I actually desire to have your lotus feet dancing on my head. We can say, oh, that would be so cool, but oh, are we ready to pay that price? Okay, Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna. So, dear devotees, we humbly requesting you all to kindly unmute, and we all chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra to express our appreciation to our revered speaker, Her Grace Mother Malati Devi Jai.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Hare Hare.
Vancha karma tarunasya kripa Ananta Kuti Vaishnava address Monamalati Devi Dasi.
Haribol. Govinda. Haribol.
Hare Krishna.